Welcome to the show, Americans. This is the patriotic, opinionated American constitutionalist. Welcome to the show, fellow patriots. This is the patriotic, opinionated American constitutionalist. Today's discussion about the hot topic of voter suppression, having a valid ID to vote. And we are going to jump right into it. So, the myth of voter suppression, having a valid ID to vote, is one of the biggest key points that most people bring up when talking about voter suppression, is having to present a valid ID to vote. I mean, you need ID for pretty much damn near anything in the world nowadays. You have to have an ID for everything, to drive, to see the doctor, to apply for a job, get a prescription, and the list goes on and on. But you need a valid ID when you're doing these things. But why is requiring an ID to prove who you are to vote? Why is that considered racist, but everything else isn't? Voter ID depresses, according to the left, voter ID depresses minority turnout. So how is this possible? Well, according to the left, by requiring an ID to vote, minorities will not be able to vote. But this is a lie that's being perpetrated by the left and liberals to spin the narrative that Republican Party is a racist party against minorities. But wouldn't Republicans want the minority votes? Wouldn't Republicans want to do everything they possibly can to get the minorities to vote Republican? I mean, it would only make sense that Republicans want everybody's vote. The Republican Party was a party that was the anti-slavery party who fought for minorities to have the right to vote, the right to be free, the right, all the rights that we have in the United States today. The Republican Party is the one that fought for those rights. So why does the left always paint the narrative that the Republican Party is a party of racism and hatred when it's just the opposite? So minorities are voting in greater numbers and higher percentages than ever before. The number of black Americans eligible to vote for the president has reached a record of 30 million in 2020, with more than one third living in 9 of the nation's most competitive states like Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. A higher share than the 29% of all U.S. eligible voters who live in these states. Now, nationwide, black eligible voters now make up 12.5% of the U.S. electorate, up from 11.5 in just the year 2000. Now, we have Kamala Harris, who was pushing this narrative back in 2018 whenever they had the midterms, stating that when Stacey Abrams lost in Georgia, who, by the way, lost by over 50,000 votes, but in a speech to the NAACP, the Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris, who was at the time, called for changing election laws to fight back against those Republicans who suppress our constitutional right to vote. Now, Harris, who was a U.S. Senator for California, pointed to the outcome of 2 close races for the governor in the South. And she stated, "Let's say this loud and clear. Without voter suppression, Stacey Abrams would be the governor of Georgia, and Andrew Gillum would be the governor of Florida." But Harris told the NAACP in Detroit on May 5th of 2018 that the main piece of evidence relates to voter registration, meaning having voter ID and everything else, but also people that are registered to vote. Now, Georgia removed about 1.4 million votes from the rolls between 2012 and 2018. Now, the reason they did this is because many of them died. They moved away, so that cancels out them being able to vote in that area if they moved away from that area, or they lost their rights to vote because they committed a felony. According to the voting laws and rules, that if you have a felony, you're no longer eligible to vote, which to me makes sense. And these are all routine reasons for removing voters in any state. But Many other residents were removed because they skipped previous elections. They didn't turn out for them. They only vote for specific elections, which if that's what they want to do, that's their choice. But they also had no contact with any election officials. If you want to be able to maintain that right to be able to vote, you need to stay in contact with these election officials so that way they know you're still eligible to vote. You're still living in the area, you're paying your taxes, doing whatever you have to do. But with that being said, it's you have to still maintain that contact, whether it's through voting, not voting, by submitting your registration cards whenever they come in, and everything else. So, mandating voter ID and creating anti-fraud measures like removing inactive voters, this is essential to be able to provide a fair election. And isn't this what all parties want, not just the Republicans, but isn't that what Democrats want too? Isn't that what Republicans want, liberals, anybody that's running for any type of major election? That's what you want. You want it to be a fair election without any corruption, without voter fraud, without ballot harvesting, without any of it. But the left is the one that's painting this picture that when a Republican wins, it's got to be some type of collusion or fraud, or I mean, and there's no proof of it. But they take it from, well, we have an anonymous source that we cannot divulge who the source is, but this source is telling us this. Okay, well, still show us proof. Now the census shows that voter turnout climbed 11% in 2018 midterm from 2014. The 2018 election was widely recognized for its high voter turnout. Even the Census Bureau data shows who is behind the historic 11 percentage point increase from the last midterm election in 2014. Voter turnout went up among all voting ages and all major racial and ethnic groups. 53% of the citizen voting age population voted in 2018, the highest midterm turnout in 4 decades, while the 2014 election had the lowest. Now, among 18 to 29-year-olds, voter turnout went from 20% in 2014 to 36% in 2018, the largest percentage point increase for any age group. That's a 79% jump. Now, black turnout has increased 27%. Hispanic turnout has increased 50%. In 2012, blacks voted at a higher rate than whites. Now, going back to Stacey Abrams, Abrams stated that Republicans had been hard at work trying to disenfranchise black voters. But the reality is that the black voter registration is outpacing white registration in the Peach State. So, all major racial and ethnic groups saw historic jumps in the voter turnout in 2018. Now, these gains are not limited to blacks. Voting has been up substantially in all minority groups. An analysis of the census data published by the Pew Research Center found that all major racial and ethnic groups saw historic jumps in voter turnout in 2018. And like I said, I mean, over 30 million more people voted in 2018. So if they're trying to suppress votes, apparently they're not doing a very good job. But it's this narrative that the left is trying to push, and make it sound like people can't think for themselves. You know, saying, oh, well, you can't have you don't have, if you don't have an ID because you're black, it's because of this, or you don't have an ID, so this is what it has to be. They're trying to not allow you to vote because you're too incompetent, or you're too this, or you're too that. And like I said, this is just my opinion. This is how I'm seeing things, and it's skewed and it's screwed up. I mean, 2016 Gallup poll shows, when asked about voter ID, who approves of having IDs to vote, 95% of Republicans voted for voter ID, 63% Democrats, 81% whites, 77% non-whites. So, like I said before, wouldn't Republicans want the minority vote? I mean, suppressing it doesn't sound logical. So let's go ahead and play a couple of videos here. This is Amy Horowitz, one of the guys I follow. He did an interview on a campus asking apparently what looks like a lot of liberal college kids, and that's what I've noticed also. You have a lot of these white overprivileged kids that are wanting to speak up for black people, wanting to speak up for the minorities, wanting to, oh, we need this and we need that, and if you listen into their reasoning behind a lot of it kind of sounds racist. So without further ado, let's go ahead and play a couple of these clips.
Do you have an opinion on voter ID laws?
Yeah, they're usually pretty racist and they're bad.
I think voter ID laws are a way to perpetuate racism.
Would you go as far as say those laws are racist?
For sure.
Do you think it suppresses the African American vote?
Definitely.
Tell us how.
Because they're less likely to have state IDs.
Minority voters are less likely to have the kinds of IDs that have been described or required.
These type of people don't live in areas with easy access to DMVs or other places where they can get identification.
You can always get IDs you do over the internet. Does that also make it difficult for black people in particular?
Yeah, you have to have access to the internet. You have to be able to pay an internet service provider for certain fees.
Do you think that's harder for black people to go online?
Well, I feel like they don't have the knowledge of how it works.
A lot of people have smartphones, but you might not have data.
For most of the communities, they don't really know what is out there just because they're not aware or they're not informed.
I also think there's a repression of black voting with how if you're a convicted felon, you're not allowed to vote and everything. And when you look at swing states like Florida, that's a huge population of the African American.
All right, this is what it makes it look like. This is what white people think about the black community, and it's not all white people that think that way. It seems to me it's these liberal kids that have all these false realities in their head of, oh, well, black people are poor, black people can't afford driver's licenses or any type of IDs, and well, they can't afford internet, and they don't even know how to use the internet. I mean, what is that trying to? And you even had this one guy that's like, well, yeah, these types of people. I mean, that comes off to me sounding racist, and it's coming from white people. I mean, what? And y'all are supposed to be, helping the black community, but it sounds to me like y'all are dumbing them down. And black people are really intelligent people. I know guys I work with and friends that I've had in the past. I mean, they're it's sad to keep putting color to everything. I mean, people are people. Americans are Americans. Humans are humans. And stop putting colors on everything. But okay, let's go ahead and play the next clip about what black people's reactions are to this hypocrisy.
Do you carry ID?
Yes, I do.
Do you know any black person who doesn't carry ID?
No. Everyone that I know has an ID. Why would they think we don't have ID?
That's a lie. Why would they say that?
Do you have ID?
Yes.
Because I have my ID and my friends have their ID, so we know what we need to carry around.
Everybody that I know have ID. That's one of the things you need to walk around with New York with, ID.
Do you know any black adult who does not have ID?
No, I don't.
Is it a weird thing to even say that?
Yes, it is.
What is this, some type of trick candy cameras?
I know, right?
That's the only thing I brought with me.
Those are legit IDs. I heard a lot also that black people can't figure out how to get to the DMV.
Really?
What does that say to you?
I know it's that, on 25th Street.
Do you know where the DMV is around you?
It's on 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, I believe.
You know how to get there?
Yeah.
Would you have a problem getting there if you had to get there?
No.
I know these sound like silly questions. You know how to get to the DMV?
Of course.
You know where it is?
Yes.
You can get there?
Uh-huh.
No problem.
No problem.
Just checking.
Okay.
And I also heard a lot that black people, especially poor black people, have no access to the internet, can't figure out how to use the internet.
That's just stupidity, honestly. Everybody has access to the internet. Even a little kid could figure out how to work the internet.
I had access to the internet for years.
You know how to use it properly, right?
Exactly. I do it at work. So, of course, I know how to use it. My kids know how to use it. They all have iPads, iPods, whatever.
Your phone has data?
Mm-hmm.
You can actually
unlimited.
Unlimited data.
Mm-hmm.
I use my phone as a hotspot.
What does that say to you for the people who have this perception of black people?
They're pretty much ignorant. That's what my thought process was.
I just think that's ignorant.
Ignorant.
Ignorant. That's the word I'm
Very,
hearing
very
a lot.
ignorant.
Ignorant.
Very, very ignorant.
Does it sound racist for somebody to say that?
I think it is a little racist because, you know, you're putting people in a category and you have no idea what you're talking about.
Maybe a little bit of racist in it, but like I said, I think it's more stupidity and ignorance.
You're judging somebody, like, but you're judging them because they black, saying that they don't got it.
What people are they talking to? Who are these people talking to?
Do you have a problem that if you go to vote and they say, "Can we please see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are?" Are you
Love
cool?
showing my ID.
You got no problem with that?
Nope.
Would you have a problem if, when you go to vote, if they say, "Can we please just see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are?" Do you have an issue with that?
No.
Would you have a problem if there was a rule where you have to show your ID in order to vote?
I don't think so. No.
Would you have an issue if there was a rule saying you got to show your ID before you vote?
Now here we got just a list of just a few things that require a driver's license or a valid ID to drive, to apply for a job, to get on Medicare and Medicaid, to apply for welfare assistance, to buy cigarettes, to buy alcohol, to get a plane ticket, to check out a book at the library. You need an ID. I mean, even when you go to the pharmacy, let me see your ID. You don't hear people going, "Well, that's racist. You want to see my ID so I can get my prescription." It's BS. It's a narrative that the left is driving, and it's not right. It's not fair. It's crooked. It's hypocritical, in my opinion. But with that being said, my fellow patriots, God bless you. Send much love. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and get the word out. With that being said, God bless. Stay true, stay wise, and stay safe.